Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes. Has Mr. Depp proven by a greater weight of the evidence that, question, the statement was made or published by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the statement was false? Answer, yes. Question, the statement has a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp? Answer, yes. Question, the defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard? Answer, yes.
Okay, so the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial has reached a verdict and we now know the outcome of it. The jury decided that Depp was correct in his defamation claim and awarded him with $15 million in total. This was brought down to $10,350,000 due to caps in the state. They also decided that Amber was correct in one count of her defamation claim and awarded her with $2 million. Throughout this video, we're going to be going over the result, why it went the way it did, and also the last 2 days of the trial, which were arguably the most important out of the entire thing. Now, I've constantly had to remind people that this is a defamation case, centered primarily around the op-ed that Amber Heard wrote. Though this didn't name Johnny, his legal team have been arguing that it was clearly about him and that it also ruined his career. On the flip side of this, Amber Heard's side countersued and stated that Johnny had ruined her career by colluding with Adam Waldman to release images and allegations that she was abusive to him. Abuse comes in many forms, either being verbal, physical, or mentally, which this case has went through at several points. Heard took a two-point strategy in firstly denying that the op-ed was about him, but she also stated that he was abusive to her, so even if they ruled that it was written with him in mind, that it's still true. On the last day though, she did kind of slip up and admit that the op-ed was about him, which meant that she had to basically double down on the second point to cover her bases.
You told this jury under oath that you had no idea that the paparazzi would be at the courthouse on May 27, 2016. You didn't expect a TMZ employee to show up to testify that TMZ had been alerted that you would be at the courthouse and knew exactly which side of your face to take a picture of, did you?
I know how many people will come out and say whatever for him. That's his power. That's why I wrote the op-ed. I was speaking to that phenomenon. How many people will come out in support of him and will fall to his power? He is a very powerful man, and people love currying favor with powerful men.
Currying
I know
favor
that
and
firsthand.
risking jail time for committing perjury?
Excuse me? I didn't hear your question.
You didn't hear my question?
Ms. Vasquez, if you do mind, please just repeat the question. I didn't hear you.
Curry favor and commit perjury in this courtroom?
I have seen
people
do this.
Man?
I have seen people do this time and time again.
As I've been covering this trial, I've had many people also bring up the libel case in London, saying that this definitely proves Heard was the sole victim, but that was never against her, rather it was against the Sun newspaper. They printed a story about the entire situation, and Depp was suing them for libel. However, he would have only won this if he could prove that they knew the story was false, and still knowingly printed it. This is of course impossible to prove to a newspaper, and as they were given Amber's evidence, they ran with it. I never thought Johnny should have gone that route, and in all honesty, you might remember that he ended up having to leave Fantastic Beasts after the verdict of it. This isn't about proving what's really happened, it's about proving the op-ed was either about Johnny or that it wasn't. Now, defamation cases are rarely won because it's so difficult to out and out say for definite these kinds of allegations. However, at least in the eyes of the jury, Depp proved his side. Either way, I think that Depp basically wanted to get his side of the story out there, as we've pretty much only heard what happened from Amber. Though there were clips, photos, and recordings released by Johnny, they never had the full weight of the media behind them like Heard's did, and it never got the attention it also deserved, at least in my opinion. Now, what does this verdict really mean? Well, it's something that the media aren't fully reporting on truthfully, and when you boil it down to its most basic terms, if the jury believed that Depp had abused Amber, then he would have lost this case. So, though they aren't lining it out, this is bad for Heard because it means she either didn't provide enough evidence to back up her claims, or that they were as fake as Depp said they were. This is why it's very damaging for Heard's story, because it states that she lied, which was further followed up in the decision on her side. Now, the count that Heard won on relates to the statement made by Depp's team that she and her friends called the police to make it look like there'd been a domestic disturbance. When they then left, it was stated that they staged the scene to make it look like there'd been a fight, and they called the police once more. So she won on this claim being defamatory. However, the two counts that she lost on was centered around the entire thing being a hoax, that Heard used as a weapon against Depp. This is really bad for her public image, and it will likely have massive ramifications on her career. There's a lot of talk from people who support Heard at the moment that public opinion was heavily influenced by TikTok and YouTubers who cherry-pick clips to hammer home that she was the one at fault, but this jury didn't have any outside influences and they were under strict instructions to not watch any coverage of the trial. There's also people saying that those who support Depp didn't really watch the trial, but I've seen this used alongside them saying the UK one was right, even though it wasn't televised. Either way, I don't think this verdict has really changed people's mind on who they're supporting. For the rest of the video, we're going to be going over the last 2 days, the statements that were made, and how I believe they ended up influencing this decision. Now, our last video released just after Kate Moss took to the stand, and from this point onwards, we had several last-minute testimonies. This included Morgan Tremaine, an ex-TMZ employee who discussed the photographs taken of Heard leaving the courthouse with bruises on her face. Heard has denied tipping off the outlet, and though he didn't confirm whether she was the source that told them to be there, he went over the entire situation and how they get their info.
And who were the type of sources that TMZ received tips from?
They would receive tips from, oftentimes it would be publicists, managers, agents, or B-list celebrities.
Lawyers?
And lawyers, definitely.
How are tips verified?
Tips are verified by an extensive process. If they come in through our tip line, we have to verify who sent it, that the source is truthful, and so they have to add their contact information, which is a field in that on that website for like name, phone number, things like that.
And how long did that process typically take?
If we receive a tip through the tip line, it could take a while because that would need to be, if it was a tip, we would need to verify it. If it was media, such as photos or videos, that would need to be extensively verified to ensure that the person sending it is the copyright holder and that we would have the legal ability to air it and distribute it.
And while working for TMZ, were you involved in any assignments related to Ms. Heard?
I was.
What was the first time you recall working on an assignment related to Ms. Heard?
I believe it was May 27th, 2016.
And what was your role in that assignment?
For that, Ms. Heard was filing a restraining order at a courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. So I dispatched camera people to that location.
Under what circumstances would you normally send paparazzi to a courthouse?
Only if we had been informed prior. It's not by any means a celebrity hotspot. We would only ever send people there if we had been tipped off that something was occurring and there was somebody present there.
And what footage was TMZ trying to capture at the LA courthouse on May 27th, 2016?
We were trying to capture Amber leaving the courthouse and an alleged bruise on the right side of her face.
What was your team of paparazzi supposed to do while they were at the LA courthouse on May 27th, 2016?
Their objective was to capture her leaving the courthouse, and then she was going to sort of stop and turn towards the camera to display the bruise on the right side of her face, the alleged bruise.
Did your team of videographers get the shot of Amber Heard?
We did.
What is the difference between receiving a tip from a news producer and any other source?
If it's any other source, it would have to be verified by copyright. If it was anything that was received directly through a news producer, then they go through that process to verify the source.
Did you do anything to verify the tip on May 27th, 2016 related to Amber Heard?
I did not.
Why not?
Because it had come directly from a news producer.
Does that mean it had been verified?
It means that they had verified that tip and deemed that it was credible, and therefore a camera person needed to be dispatched.
So this testimony basically states that it was either Heard herself or someone very close to her that tipped off TMZ to be at the courthouse. This moment is being criticised online because it's the one time that Heard stated she didn't wear makeup to cover her bruises, which Depp's team have argued means that it's staged. Tremaine never got into who tipped him off, and he also discussed the video of Johnny slamming cabinets that was sent to TMZ. Tremaine actually went viral for clapping back at Heard's team when they said he was just after his 15 minutes of fame.
You know this case is being televised, right?
I am aware that there are cameras.
And so this gets you your 15 minutes of fame, doesn't
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
it? I can ask that question.
Overruled.
So I stand to gain nothing from this. I'm actually putting myself kind of in a target of TMZ, a very litigious organization, and I'm not seeking any 15 minutes here. Though you're welcome to speculate. I could say the same thing by taking Amber Heard as a client for you.
A little argumentative, don't you think?
Oh, hardly. I find that to be purely logical. Thank you.
Now, are you aware that Mr. Depp's attorneys were well aware of the TRO that was going to be presented on May 27th?
Objection calls for speculation.
Were you aware of that?
Lack of foundation.
Overruled if you can answer it.
Can you restate the question?
Were you aware that Mr. Depp's divorce attorneys were aware that Amber Heard was going in to seek a TRO on May 27th?
I don't think I understand the question. I don't think so, no.
Okay.
kind
Do
of a
you
complicated
know whether Blair Burke, one of Mr. Depp's divorce attorneys, had a very close relationship with TMZ at that time?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled. If he knows.
I was not aware of that.
Okay. And when you said that you were dispatched twice, once to film Amber in the parking lot for the deposition, and then it didn't work out, and so you had to do it another time, how did you know it didn't work out?
Because TMZ.com posted an article saying as much.
Okay.
And
Do you
I was
know-
not dispatched.
Do you
I
know
worked in the office.
why the deposition did not work out?
I'd have to reference the article, I forget.
So do you know?
I didn't write that story. I wasn't involved in the
Do
actual
you know
journalism of that.
which side? Do you know which side would have known or not known whether that deposition was going to work out? In other words, the people representing Mr. Depp or the people representing Ms. Heard?
I wouldn't know.
Now from here we had Dr. Shannon Curry take the stand once more. She basically went over the finer points of her first testimony and then also went over Dr. Hughes' counter one. In case you don't know, Curry basically outlined that Amber had BPD and had fabricated most of her story about Depp, whilst Hughes said the complete opposite and stated that it was all true in her opinion. Curry was called back and went over the PTSD test that she had given to Amber, and she stated that in her opinion, Hughes made the test fit the results that she wanted, rather than the other way around, which is how it should be. Curry also stated that the test purposely has questions in it that are put in there to detect people faking PTSD. These will seem like genuine ones, but people who answer them are likely trying to give the impression that they have it when they really don't.
So Dr. Hughes generally said that testing supported PTSD and that there was an etiology for her trauma of intimate partner violence. She did reference that essentially I can't remember if she said that the trauma symptom inventory indicated PTSD, but she did say that the elevation on that validity scale is consistent with PTSD, and that's simply not true. That scale was designed and has been tested and shown to be there to show when somebody is endorsing extremely unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD. And even though when some people are experiencing PTSD, their distress level is so high that they'll engage in what we call a cry for help, and they may sometimes exaggerate distress. Again, when you're looking at scores as high as Ms. Heard's, and then you're not seeing indications of PTSD in the more subtle tests where she doesn't know what she's endorsing, it's good evidence that her over-endorsement on that one test is because of the reason the scale was made, to detect exaggeration and feigning of symptoms.
Is this the test that resulted in the 98th percentile
Yes.
score?
Yes, on that atypical response scale.
And what does that 98th percentile score represent?
So that 98th percentile score just represents that among 98% of people who take that test would not have endorsed. She scored more of those unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD than 98% of people who have ever taken that test.
Does that relate to this concept you talked about before called feigning?
Yes.
What is feigning again?
Well, feigning is essentially exaggerating symptoms of a disorder.
Hughes pretty much said the opposite to this, but Curry stated that she shouldn't have given Heard's statement as fact without also examining Johnny. She questioned whether this self-reporting was ethical and then went on to talk about whether she believed Heard had PTSD or not.
Dr. Hughes says that Ms. Heard has PTSD. Do you agree?
I do not.
Why not?
The results of my multi-method comprehensive evaluation based on carefully selected, researched, relevant test instruments, based on comparing those instruments to Ms. Heard's self-report, observing Ms. Heard's behavior over 12 direct hours of assessment, reviewing copious notes from prior therapists who indicated symptoms in their notes, reviewing the notes of Nurse Filati, previously Nurse Borum, who spent, I believe at one point, almost 2 months with Ms. Heard daily, reviewing the notes of her treating providers, all of the legal documents and discovery. There was no evidence of PTSD.
How is evidence of PTSD generally exhibited?
So really the bottom line in a forensic psychological evaluation is a change in functioning. That's what we're looking for. Again, I said we don't have a crystal ball. We're not wizards. We can't get into somebody's head. What we're looking for were there identifiable changes in the way the person engaged in their world. Were they able to keep a job? PTSD is an extremely disabling diagnosis. When a person has true PTSD, it is difficult for them to work. You'll see unemployment, job loss. It causes extreme levels of distress and impairment. There's divorce, there's isolation and estrangement from children, from family members, extreme alcohol abuse, often a string of sudden DUIs when the person never had any before. They become homebound, they can't go to the store. They're certainly not going to events. They're not having success in their film career, usually. They're not exercising every day, pursuing their hobbies, being avid readers, obtaining level 3 sommelier training, having dinner parties with friends, speaking to public groups. Those are just indications of very high functioning. And when you're looking for a decrease in functioning over time, that is inconsistent with that decrease.
And from here, we got a discussion on the photographs that Amber submitted as evidence. Johnny's team brought forth a metadata expert to go over some of the items Amber had submitted, which was then rebuffed by her witness. I try and keep my opinion out of this stuff, but I really don't know why Amber and her team thought it was wise to submit this photograph as two separate pieces, when you can tell it's the same photo, isn't it? Amber said that one was taken with a vanity light on and the other without one, but if you zoom in and look at even the flecks of hair, they're all in the exact same position, which I think would be absolutely impossible to do by accident. To me, this was a major point in the case that I was surprised Heard's team actually allowed her to submit, and Depp's side even placed the images over the top of each other to show how they lined up.
And Mr. Neumeister, what's your, what do we see here in this demonstrative?
There's Exhibit 712, I believe you have. I'm not sure the date's number, 712 and 713. They're two separate exhibits, except it's the exact same photograph that's been, one's been edited, one hasn't. Or I can't say that one hasn't, but the colors have been modified in an editor.
Objection, Your Honor. Beyond the scope of your ruling, talking about colors. It keeps happening.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, he was also asked about the bruised photographs.
And Mr. Neumeister, what does this demonstrative show about the photos that you analyzed?
Well, they appear to be similar. However, if you look below at the file sizes, one on the left is 712 kilobytes. The one in the middle is 489 kilobytes. And the one on the right is 524 kilobytes. Now, what's unusual about that is these photos will not digitally fingerprint with each other. They won't hash. In other words, forensically, they don't match. But the thing is, you could say, well, it was sent through email, maybe it's a different size. The file sizes, for example, would be possibly, you can select the file size, you send a photo, but there's no way to authenticate any photo that was presented in the way the evidence was collected.
And so what conclusions do you draw from that?
Well, this is just three of many of the same type of photos that are all different sizes and have different chromatic, which means color.
Objection, Your Honor. We just had a ruling on this.
All right. Sustained objection. Mr. Newmaster, stick to your opinions that relate specifically to what you analyzed about the EXIF data, please.
All three of these photos had to go through some type of transformation to change sizes.
Amber's team then brought in their own expert, but he kind of scored an own goal on it.
Sir, you just agreed with me that those two photos are different photos, correct?
I agreed that they were visually different, yes.
Right. So they are two visually different photos that were created at the exact same hour, the exact same minute, the exact same second as each other, correct?
And that's what the daytime metadata shows, yes.
And the metadata shows something else too. They have the exact same file name, don't they, sir?
Yes, but that's not embedded metadata.
So again, he just confirms this is the same photo, which we all knew, and I really don't understand why the legal team allowed this to be submitted as two separate images. This was a case that was built massively around Amber's credibility, and it was such a risk submitting this in the first place. Now, another thing that was a major risk was allowing both Amber and Johnny to take the stand again. In court, you rarely want to have your client giving testimony because it gives the other side a chance to bring out as many things against you as they can. This is why whenever you watch movies based on trials, they tend to have, say, the murderer not testifying or at least not being advised to. Heard's team really didn't waste any time either, and they brought out so many text messages that made Depp look bad. I'm not going to analyze this, and that's the same with Amber's statement, as it goes over some pretty graphic stuff, and I run the risk of making light of certain things, but the testimonies are out in full on YouTube if you want to see them. Throughout this whole thing, I've tried to put myself in the position of the jury, and I know that if it was me, I'd be focused on what the witnesses and experts say, rather than what the people involved in it themselves do, as there's more chance of them being biased. Whether this was an ego play by Depp's team or not, we will likely never know, but having Depp on the stand once more also made Amber come forward as well, and like I said, I don't think that she should have done this. It allowed Camille Vasquez to go over everything all over again, leave it fresh in the jury's mind, and she also brought forth new evidence that she'd been holding up her sleeve. It was also where Amber basically said that she wrote the op-ed about Johnny, and doing this on the last 2 days for both sides was extremely risky, and in my opinion led to the verdict that we got. And that takes us to the closing statements. All 4 lawyers took completely different strategies, and as always, Camille came out with a barrage of evidence, and also the witnesses that testified against Amber. These were all about 40 minutes long. I sat and watched them all day, but huge shoutouts to Entertainment Tonight for cutting down the main highlights. Ben Chew followed this up by going over the more emotional aspects of it, which was then countered by Heard's lawyer, Ben Rottenborn. Heard hasn't really had the physical evidence throughout this trial, so he played up the hand he had, which was going over the emotional testimony and how devastating it had been for her. Elaine then came after this, and if you watched any of the live streams like Legal Bites, then you'll know the lawyers thought she took a pretty bad approach. It was full of sweeping statements based on very little, and was arguably the worst out of the bunch, using up all her team's time and then allowing Depp to have a massive rebuttal. This left Heard's team with a 6-minute rebuttal, whereas Depp's had 39 because they were straight to the point and didn't mess about. Ironically, these were dropped on May 27th, 6 years to the day that Amber went to the courthouse, and an Amber Alert also went off during Rottenborn's statement, which you couldn't make it up.
Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup. She tipped off the paparazzi so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see, the image of a battered woman. What the paparazzi did not know is that the dark mark on her face mysteriously appeared 6 days after last seeing Mr. Depp. It was a lie. She knew it, Mr. Depp knew it, and the multiple witnesses you heard from who saw her that week of May 21st, 2016, also knew it. But the world only saw what she wanted them to see. 2 years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career, until this trial, Ms. Heard presented herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence. even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted 2 years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse, and they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse by Ms. Heard during their relationship. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face. You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. You also heard from Tara Roberts, a manager at Mr. Depp's island, who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely. You also heard from Ms. Roberts that she witnessed Ms. Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her, and Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion. Most importantly, you heard from Ms. Heard yourselves on multiple audio recordings admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Ms. Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas, you never heard Ms. Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault. Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Ms. Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Ms. Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Ms. Heard that repeatedly admits to violence. When you catch Ms. Heard in a lie, she tries to cover it up with more lies. So let's talk about the giant lie at the heart of this case. Ms. Heard's claim that Mr. Depp is an abusive monster and that she is a public figure representing domestic abuse. She spun a story of shocking, overwhelming, brutal abuse. She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it. Ms. Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Ms. Heard has difficulty crying when she is acting. You saw it. Ms. Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse and everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it. Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse. Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Erin Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight, Morgan Tremaine, Officers Melissa Sines, Officers Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly Leonard.
Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her in his 58 years. And no other woman since Ms. Heard made that false claim back on May 27th, 2016, and repeated it in her December 2018 op-ed. Has any woman come forward since? This is Me Too without any Me Too. To the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Kate Moss 2 days ago testify. This is a woman who has never testified in any proceeding, ever. A very private person. Testified that Mr. Depp never abused her and that Ms. Heard lied to you. And she lied to you twice. Beyond the personal and emotional effects of Ms. Heard's lies, their impact on Mr. Depp and his family, the damage she inflicted on his reputation and career is undeniable. There's an old saying that a good reputation takes a lifetime to build, but only a second to destroy. Mr. Depp spent, in fact, a lifetime building his reputation as one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation, an iconic figure respected and liked throughout Hollywood and recognized and admired throughout the world. As you heard in this case, Amber Heard is not a true victim, and Mr. Depp certainly is not an abuser. Again, nobody has come out of the woodwork to say, Me Too. This is the unique and singular Me Too case where there's not a single Me Too.
She did a better recap than me. Now, Ben Chew constantly bringing up Me Too and saying there was no Me Too was a line that really stuck out, and I think whatever the result, that they delivered two powerful statements. Next we go to Rottenborn and Elaine.
In Mr. Depp's world, you don't leave Mr. Depp. And if you do, he will start a campaign of global humiliation against you. A smear campaign that lasts to this very day. He will do everything he can to destroy your life, to destroy your career. That is what they're saying, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what they're trying to get you, the jury, to be an accomplice to. But it's not surprising, because Mr. Depp cannot and will not take responsibility for his own actions. It's always someone else's fault. Does the First Amendment give Ms. Heard the right to write the words that she wrote in this article on December 18th, 2018? That's the question. And you cannot simultaneously protect and uphold the First Amendment and find in favor of Johnny Depp on his claim. You simply cannot. You have to decide, should someone be able to write an article like that in the United States of America without being sued successfully, without having to go through the hell that Ms. Heard has gone through? Think about every piece of evidence that you've heard over the last 6 weeks about his abuse, about their relationship. None of that is in the article. None of it. We all know that it would be a very different article if she had written about what she suffered, that she's told you about over the last 6 weeks. Because he knows the words are true, Mr. Depp says that the words now have a defamatory implication. He says the statements are the same as saying, Johnny Depp abused me. But just because he wants to make the article about himself doesn't mean it is. He has to show you that any defamatory implication was designed and intended. Look at number 4. Designed and intended by Ms. Heard to convey the defamatory meaning that he suggests. Just because people might read the article and remember, oh yeah, Amber Heard used to be married to Johnny Depp, and she accused him of abuse, that doesn't mean that she designed and intended defamatory implications in writing about herself. And think about it. If Mr. Depp is right, then virtually any statement that anyone could ever make about their own life that implies anything, implies any involvement with any other person, could be defamatory. And that's clearly not what the First Amendment intends. She didn't design and intend the words to be the equivalent of writing "Johnny Depp abused me." And you don't have to take her words for it. You can take the words of Terrence Doherty of the ACLU. He said that the op-ed wasn't even Ms. Heard's idea. The ACLU wrote the first draft, and great care was taken in drafting the article so as not to make it about Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard's relationship with him. That's the only evidence presented about Ms. Heard's motive, except her statements that was exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about her experiences after Johnny Depp. Ms. Heard didn't write the headline. She didn't approve the headline. She had nothing to do with it. She was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that they're calling her a liar. You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth, exactly what she went through for the first time in court, because people who have suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. They want to penalize Ms. Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's just victim blaming at its most disgusting.
You can't restore his reputation. You can't give him anything. They didn't tell you that, but the court told you that. And that's a very, very important thing here. He told his story. He had his opportunities. He had his full opportunities to do all of that. And he came in here and lied to you and said he's here to get his reputation back. It's just one of many lies in this case, but it's a really big one, because here we are, 6 weeks of your time, precious time, 6 weeks of this court's time, for what? For nothing. Only to go after Amber. That's psychological abuse. He's going after Amber for nothing, because he wants to put her through this again, the third time. So we're fighting back, and that's the counterclaim. She finally has said enough. Enough. And we're asking you to finally hold this man responsible. He has never accepted responsibility for anything in his life. Once again, the next day, Johnny apologizes to Amber. He says in 2 different text messages, that's 772 and 773, he says, my profound apologies in one of them, and my apologies are eternal in the other one. What is he apologizing for the next day on May 22nd if he didn't know that he did all of those things? She wasn't wearing any makeup. She was natural. She wasn't wearing a stitch of makeup. Every one of them says it. It's the exact same thing. Well, why would you say that? She's an actor. She's not going to go outside her house, without putting makeup on. And if she has bruises, why on earth, when she's been covering them up for 4 years, why on earth would she not put makeup on so that she would cover those up? Why on earth would she not want to cover up those bruises? It makes no sense. But you know what? You guys saw her here. You saw Amber on the stand. There were days where she didn't wear eye makeup. A lot of people think that she's not wearing makeup when she doesn't have mascara and eyeliner on. She has different looks, and some of them are with eye makeup and some of them are without. And people misunderstand, especially people that aren't that good at makeup, and a lot of men, frankly, go, oh, then she probably doesn't have makeup. And that's where that mistake happens. But you heard her testimony, and you heard her makeup artist testimony saying she doesn't go out of her room without concealer and foundation. She knows how to put these things in. And you saw Defendant's Exhibit 155, and you'll have the actual thing in there. That's the type of palette she used, and she was very adept at telling you what colors she puts on for the different days of bruises. This is a woman who for 4 years did everything she could to cover up anybody knowing anything about this abuse. Do you honestly think she's just going to walk around for the week with her bruises exposed? Of course she's not. If you do the math, Amber is entitled to at least 31.5. What does she take? $7 million. What does she do with the $7 million? She gives it to charity, or she intends to give it to charity. Now, they make much ado about the pledge versus donation, but both the corporate designees for ACLU and for Children's Hospital said donation and pledge are interchangeable. These are pledges. The ACLU corporate designee said you typically do pledges because of the tax benefits, and that's what she said. She pledged it over a period of time because of the tax implications to it and because she was getting paid over the time. Now, she started to make these donations, and you'll see that the first one was on behalf of Mr. Depp's business manager, Mr. White, actually sent the letters with the $100,000 for each of those. That was the initial ones. He was trying to take credit for those, and in fact, both the ACLU and Children's Hospital got confused and gave the credit to Mr. Depp, not to Amber, for those. Then she made payments to both, and Elon Musk also made payments to both for $500,000 each, which she didn't count to her pledge, but they helped those organizations. At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. That is unrefuted. She still intends to pay those pledges, honor those pledges, and she said that throughout, and I elicited from both the ACLU and from Children's Hospital, they haven't expired, she can pay them whenever she wants to, and she fully intends to, but she has to get out from under this first. They started to get Amber fired from Aquaman 2. They have continued to this day. They have followed her everywhere. Everybody has stopped wanting her. L'Oreal won't use her, even though they've kept her on from that time. She lost 3 different opportunities that were being discussed with her. The most significant part of that, though, is that Aquaman was the biggest blockbuster ever for DC Films. It was the biggest. It was over $1 billion. This was her opportunity for her star. Even the experts from Mr. Depp admitted this was her blockbuster, this was her mega. But what happened instead? As she's going through, as it's coming out, and in that 16 months they were going, well, nothing happened. Yeah, lots happened. She had 3 different films she was discussing. She got the L'Oreal contract. She got The Stand. All of those things were happening because of Aquaman. And then everything shut down. She wasn't allowed to do publicity for The Stand. She wasn't allowed to, she hasn't been allowed to do anything for L'Oreal. She got shut down from her charitable organizations. She ended up not getting the Amazon movie. And then they gave her a hard time about Aquaman 2. And instead of the career trajectory of the other comparators, who all went way up, and by the way, all the experts admit that career trajectory went well for all the rest of them, and she's the only one that didn't have it. And the reason is because of the defamatory statements.
Now, Camille fired back to Rottenborn that the First Amendment didn't cover hate speech, and Elaine also said something very stupid. She said she didn't want them to take the $100 million that they were suing for. All she said was they wanted some damages back, which wasn't exactly the smartest strategy, but either way, that was the trial, and the jury deliberated over the holiday weekend in the US. Now that brings us to the verdict, which I watched live, and we even had a bit where they had to delay the decision because the jury didn't fill out the form correctly. It was very tense, but it did hint that someone had indeed won. In the end, they found that the article was defamatory and that Amber pushed the idea that Depp was abusive to destroy his career. Since then, the pair have both released statements. Amber's reads, "The disappointment I feel today is beyond words. I'm heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power, influence, and sway of my ex-husband. I'm even more disappointed with what this verdict means for other women. It is a setback. It sets back the clock to a time when a woman who spoke up and spoke out could be publicly shamed and humiliated. It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. I believe Johnny's attorney succeeded in getting the jury to overlook the key issues of freedom of speech and ignore evidence that was so conclusive that we won in the UK. I'm sad I lost this case, but I am sadder still I seem to have lost a right I thought I had as an American, to speak freely and open." Now Johnny's reads, 6 years ago, my life, the life of my children, the lives of those closest to me, and also the lives of the people who for many, many years have supported and believed in me were forever changed. All in the blink of an eye. False, very serious and criminal allegations were levied at me via the media, which triggered an endless barrage of hateful content, although no charges were ever brought against me. It had already travelled around the world twice within a nanosecond, and it had a seismic impact on my life and my career. And 6 years later, the jury gave me my life back. I am truly humbled. My decision to pursue this case, knowing very well the height of the legal hurdles that I would be facing and the inevitable worldwide spectacle into my life, was only made after considerable thought. From the very beginning, the goal of bringing this case was to reveal the truth, regardless of the outcome. Speaking the truth was something I owed to my children and to all those who remain steadfast in their support of me. I feel at peace knowing I've firmly accomplished that. After hearing this, his lawyers said this.
Their careful deliberation, to the judge and the court staff who have devoted an enormous amount of time and resources towards this case.
Our judicial system is predicated on each person's right to have his or her case heard, and we were honored, truly honored, to assist Mr. Depp in ensuring that his case was fairly considered throughout the trial. We are also most pleased that the trial has resonated for so many people in the public who value truth and justice. Now that the jury has reached its conclusive verdict, it's time to turn the page and look to the future. Thank you all so much, and thanks to the jury.
Thank you so much.
So, whether either will work again remains to be seen, but I think that Depp will at least now have the vindication to get his career back on track. Depp has said he would never go back to work with Disney on Pirates of the Caribbean, but I do think there might at least be some negotiations there. As for Heard, we know her role is massively cut down in Aquaman 2, and whether she continues as this character remains to be seen. This trial could potentially bankrupt her, and I doubt the charities will ever receive the money that she pledged. Now, this trial obviously has a lot going on with it. I've admitted that I've had some biases throughout, and I think that everyone will have their own biases when it comes to it. I think that no matter what the verdict is, people have watched the trial, seen the clips, and have made up their own mind, so today's verdict doesn't even really matter that much. The way I see it, there's Team Johnny, Team Amber, Team I Don't Care, and Team They Both Suck. I think that going forward, this trial will have a long legacy to it, as not only are the implications of abuse being talked about openly, but it also has two extremely famous people airing their dirty laundry. There's also the legal side of it, and some of the cross-examinations I think will be used in law schools to show how one should approach a witness. Now, there is of course the heavier side of this, and I know that there are victims out there that have been affected by this trial. If you are one of them, then please go to victim support, and if you're in the UK, that's victimsupport.org.uk. It's a great organisation that can help with domestic violence, and if you're going through something or have been through it, then please reach out to them. Anyway, that wraps up the trial, and I hope you enjoyed the coverage. Kinda went back and forth over whether to keep covering this, and also I've had several DMs from people angry at me, but I felt it was necessary to talk about, and thank you to everyone who sent kind messages over our coverage. Hope to see you back at the channel soon, and we have a video linked on screen right now just for you. Without the way, thanks for sticking through this. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.